Life was generally peaceful before Karen. As the owner of a successful tech company, my days were filled with coding, strategizing, and managing a remote team. My evenings were mine, devoted to reading, tinkering with personal projects, and enjoying the solitude that came with a well-earned peace. I valued my privacy and my quiet, and I meticulously cultivated a life that reflected those priorities. The house I lived in was a testament to that. A modern, minimalist structure nestled on a large lot, providing ample space and a buffer from the outside world. I chose the location, not just for its tranquility, but also for its proximity to key infrastructure while maintaining a sense of isolation. Until Karen moved in, the biggest disruption to my routine was deciding which artisanal coffee beans to order. The initial signs were subtle. A request for the Wi-Fi password, framed as a temporary inconvenience, seemed harmless enough. I provided it, thinking it was a one-time thing. Then came the escalating demands. The garden hose, the driveway, each request chipping away at my carefully constructed boundaries. Still, I rationalized it. Small gestures, I reasoned, could foster neighborly relations, even if I preferred to keep my distance. I attributed her behavior to a lack of social awareness, perhaps even loneliness. I tried to be polite, firm, and to shut things down before they got out of hand, but she seemed to be missing all social cues. I even thought that maybe I should reach out to her family to see if they could help her in any way. The folder incident marked a distinct escalation. The audacity of it was breathtaking. A collection of her financial woes presented as if I had some moral obligation to solve them. Her reasoning was so deeply flawed, so fundamentally detached from reality, that it was almost comical. I told her no, and went back inside, hoping that the absurdity of her request would deter her. I should have known better. This was not a rational person engaging in a logical transaction. This was Karen, archetype of entitlement, operating on a completely different plane of existence. At this point, I started getting worried. I got security cameras installed and started documenting all interactions with her. I knew this would come in handy. It felt like she was building up to something. The idea that she felt entitled to my money was crazy. But the idea that she was going to try something soon was even more disturbing. Perhaps I should have preemptively contacted the authorities. But I foolishly thought she would eventually realize the absurdity of her actions and retreat. When the police lights illuminated my living room, I initially thought there had been a mistake. Perhaps a neighbor had been robbed, or there was some other emergency in the area. The reality, of course, was far more absurd. The sight of Karen, draped in faux victimhood, wailing about a verbal contract and emotional manipulation, was surreal. It felt like I'd been cast into some poorly written daytime television drama. She was putting on a show, pulling out all the stops to paint me as some kind of villain who had heartlessly reneged on a promise. The specifics of her accusations were almost too ridiculous to believe. Credit card bills, pet surgeries, even a shared Netflix account. It was a bizarre tapestry of everyday expenses, woven into a narrative of alleged financial obligation on my part. I spoke to the officers calmly, explaining the situation with as much neutrality as possible. I emphasized that I had no financial agreements with Karen, no prior relationship beyond being neighbors, and that her claims were entirely fabricated. The officer I was speaking with, a seasoned veteran with a weary expression, seemed skeptical of Karen's theatrics. He asked probing questions, trying to discern the truth from the histrionics. I could see the embarrassment on his face, the discomfort of being embroiled in what was clearly a neighborly dispute gone completely off the rails. I watched him and the other officer as they tried to contain her ranting. I looked around the street and wanted to go back in my home, but knew I could not. I had to stay out there, to make sure she did not hurt herself or others. I was hoping that the officers would take her away. While I attempted to reason with the officers, Karen's behavior took a dramatic turn. Her brazen invasion of my property, storming into my garage and attempting to pilfer my belongings, was a shocking display of entitlement and disregard for the law. Her logic, or lack thereof, was baffling. If I wouldn't pay her back, she reasoned, she would simply take something of equal value. This was theft, plain and simple. But she seemed to view it as some sort of justified recompense. The image of her, wrestling with a box of my belongings, screaming about being owed money, was a scene straight out of a dark comedy. I debated whether to laugh incredulously or yell at her to stop. Then she started yelling at the officers. It was all so bizarre. The officers, finally realizing the severity of her actions, intervened swiftly. They apprehended her, placing her in handcuffs and leading her away from my property. I thought that maybe this was the end of it. But I was wrong. The aftermath of Karen's arrest was a mix of relief and exhaustion. The absurdity of the situation was still sinking in, the sheer audacity of her actions leaving me reeling. As the officers processed the scene, I watched as they meticulously cataloged the items Karen had attempted to steal. The sight of my old tech box, sitting on the curb, triggered a pang of nostalgia. I hadn't thought about the contents of that box in years. A collection of obsolete devices, spare parts, and hard drives from various projects. I was thankful that she had not found anything important in there. One particular hard drive caught my eye. A small, unassuming device that held a treasure trove of encrypted data from a failed startup I had been involved with years ago. The memory of that venture was bittersweet. It had been a promising project, filled with innovation and potential, but greed and mismanagement had led to its downfall, culminating in allegations of embezzlement and the eventual closure of the company. I had moved on, but the memories of that time were still a stark reminder of the fragility of success and the importance of integrity. I realized that maybe I should have destroyed those old hard drives, but I was young at the time, and I moved on with my life. The officers, adhering to protocol, meticulously documented everything Karen had touched, including the encrypted hard drive. They scanned it, tested it, and logged its serial number, as they would with any other piece of potential evidence. I didn't think much of it at the time, figuring it was simply a routine procedure. I was wrong. Now I was getting worried. The police now knew about the drive, what it contained, and how old it was. I hoped that they were just doing their job. I was starting to think that the drive was not important, and the case would go cold. But again, I was wrong. The following 48 hours were a whirlwind. I went back to work, trying to focus on the pressing demands of my company, but the events of the previous day kept intruding on my thoughts. The image of Karen, ranting and raving, was burned into my memory. But things were about to take an unexpected turn. I received a call from one of the officers involved in Karen's arrest. He was terse and professional, requesting that I come down to the station for further questioning. I felt a sense of unease wash over me. Had they found something incriminating on the hard drive? Was there some connection between me and Karen that I wasn't aware of? At the station, I was ushered into a small, sterile interview room. The officer, along with a detective, sat across from me, their expressions serious. They explained that their investigation of the encrypted hard drive had yielded some unexpected results. It turned out that Karen's ex-husband had also been employed by the same failed startup I had worked for. This was a startling revelation, a thread connecting Karen to my past in a way I could never have imagined. But the connection went even deeper. As they dug further into the startup's financial records, Karen's name surfaced in connection with a phantom payroll line, a previously undetected entry that suggested she may have been involved in the embezzlement scheme that had led to the company's demise. The implications were staggering. Karen, in her desperate attempt to extort money from me, had inadvertently exposed her own potential involvement in a major financial crime. It was a twist of fate so bizarre, so ironic, that it felt like something out of a crime novel. Intentionally, or unintentionally, Karen had put herself in the crosshairs of the law. I was starting to see that this was so much bigger than just Karen trying to get money. I left the police station in a daze, the weight of the revelations pressing down on me. Karen's actions had not only disrupted my life and threatened my peace of mind, but they had also unearthed a Pandora's box of secrets and lies from my past. The failed startup, the embezzlement scandal, the encrypted hard drive. It was all coming back to haunt me in the most unexpected way. As I drove home, I couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. Would Karen be charged with financial fraud? Would her ex-husband be implicated as well? And what about me? Would I be dragged into the investigation, forced to relive the painful memories of that failed venture? The fallout from Karen's actions rippled through my life. News of her arrest and the subsequent investigation spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. I became the subject of gossip and speculation, my privacy once again invaded. I felt the sting of judgment from some neighbors, who whispered behind my back and cast suspicious glances my way. I struggled to focus on my work, the stress and uncertainty weighing heavily on my mind. I started documenting everything again. Who talked to me, what they said, and what I did. I was starting to feel like I was in a John Grisham novel. I was also starting to wonder how much more of this I could take. I contacted a lawyer, seeking guidance on how to protect myself and my company from any potential legal ramifications. He advised me to cooperate fully with the authorities, to provide them with any information I had about the startup and the embezzlement scandal. He also warned me to be prepared for the possibility of being called as a witness in any future legal proceedings. The future looked uncertain. I was sure that my life was never going to be the same. In the end, Karen was charged with multiple offenses, including filing a false police report, attempted theft, and, most significantly, conspiracy to commit financial fraud. The evidence against her, unearthed from the encrypted hard drive and corroborated by other witnesses, was overwhelming. Her ex-husband was also implicated in the scheme and faced similar charges. The wheels of justice turned slowly, but they turned nonetheless. The case dragged on for months, dominating local news headlines and captivating the attention of the community. I was called as a witness, forced to testify about my involvement with the failed startup and the events leading up to Karen's arrest. It was a grueling and emotionally draining process, but I knew it was my responsibility to do my part in bringing the truth to light. As for me, I emerged from the ordeal scarred but not broken. The experience had tested my resilience and forced me to confront the ghosts of my past. I learned valuable lessons about boundaries, the importance of trusting my instincts, and the unpredictable nature of life. I doubled down on my company, focusing on innovation and growth, determined to prove that the past would not define my future. I also decided to move. The house had been a good place for a while, but not anymore. I also made a conscious effort to rebuild my relationships with my neighbors, fostering a sense of community based on mutual respect and understanding. I vowed to be more discerning in the future, to avoid getting entangled in the dramas of others. And I learned to laugh at the absurdity of it all, to find humor in the face of adversity. Karen's actions had been reprehensible, but they had also inadvertently set in motion a chain of events that had brought hidden truths to light and ultimately led to justice being served. It was a dark chapter in my life, but it was also a reminder that even in the most unexpected circumstances, there is always the possibility of redemption and renewal.